Okay, this is from homework, or from section 4.4. This is number 41, homework problems. And if you read it, it's over on page 229. It says, how close does the curve y equals x squared come to the point 3/2 0? So what we want to do is we want to find the point on the curve and then check the distance. The point on the curve, I should say, is closest to the point 3/2 0. So this point is on the curve, the square root of x, and we want to find the point on the curve that is closest to this so that the distance between these 2 points will be a minimum. So we have to use the distance formula, and the distance formula is good old square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So you need to know your distance formula. And I can call this point, just usually label my point so I know what's going to go where. So I can call the point on the curve x2, y2, and I'll call this x1, y1, and then I'll just substitute those into the formula. And x2 was x, and x1 was 3/2, and then y2 was y, and y1 was 0. So we want to minimize that distance, so we're going to have to take the derivative of that, but we can't do anything right now because we've got two unknowns, so we can fix that. And this is going to be x minus 3/2 squared plus, and what's y? Well, y is equal to the value. So this is x f of x. So f of x is the square root of x. So this would be just the square root of x. So we can also think of these points as being x square root of x, because that's what the f of x is, or y. So we can change that and just write that as the square root of x. So it's the square root of x squared. And then we can square this out so the distance equals, and this is a binomial squared. So first term squared, minus twice the product, minus twice, and then 2 times 3/2 is just 3, so 3x, plus, and then 3/2 squared is 9/4, so that's just by squaring that binomial. And the square root of x squared, the square root of x squared is just x, so that's nice. So I can simplify this, so this is distance equals x squared minus 2x plus 9/4. Now, we talked about this before, that if we can minimize the radicand, we minimize the radical because it's a monotonic, the square root is a monotonic function. So if the radicand gets smaller, the square root of that gets smaller. So we're going to come up with this new function. I just call it g of x. Now this is the inside here, so this is actually the square of the distance, because the square root of g of x, that equals the distance. So that's actually the square of the distance. So remember that, because in these problems we have to find the distance. So g of x just equals this x squared minus 2x plus 9/4, and if we can minimize that by taking the derivative, then we can find the minimum value for the whole thing, because if we minimize the radicand, we minimize the radical. So g prime of x equals just 2x minus 2, and that's not going to be undefined, so we just set that equal to 0 to find the critical number. So 2x minus 2 equals 0, 2x equals 2, x equals 1. I'm going to check to see if that's going to be a minimum. We can put 1 in here. And if I put 1 in here, I get, I'm sorry, if I put like 0, this is 1. If I put 0 in here, I get negative. And if I put 2 in here, and this is g prime, if I put 2 in here, I get positive. So it looks like it's going So actually, the radicand, negative, positive, and this is g of x. It looks like this is going to be the minimum at x equals 1. So x equals 1 is what we're looking for, so we can just put this right back to find the distance. We can put it right back here because this is what we really want, the distance. So distance equals the square root of 1. 1 squared is 1, minus 2 times 1 is 2, plus 9 over 4. That's going to give me the minimum distance. Excuse me, can't see this. Let me get back up over here. So I just put this back in my distance formula, the easiest one to do, so this looks like this is the easiest one right here. These are all forms of that. Looks like that's easier. This is going to be negative 1 plus 9/4. That's the same thing as the square root of negative 4/4 plus 9/4. So 9 minus 4 is 5, so that's the square root of 5 over 4, which is the square root of 5 over the square root of 4, and that's equal to the square root of 5 over 2. So there's your minimum distance. Okay. So don't need to calculate on that one, it's not too bad. So I hope that makes sense. If not, go back, look at it slowly. But again, we're using that distance formula. But these problems are a little bit different than some of the ones we've been doing on our quizzes because they're actually asking you to find the distance, so you have to put it back in to the formula.